Hi folks, so follow on to yesterday's video, got quite a few interesting comments from sharp-eyed individuals who noted that the thumbnail of yesterday's video was a famous photo of a very infamous incident of a man getting stabbed to death with a knife, yet the video title was "How do we solve gun violence?" And there's a rational reason why I did that. So gun violence itself is a misnomer. There really is no such thing. It is irrational and insensible to classify violent, confrontational, and interpersonal crime on the basis of the implement used in its perpetration, right? The solution to violent crime is the same solution we're looking for gun violence, right? So it's a catch-all solution. We need to solve violent crime, and if we solve violent crime, we will solve this thing called gun violence that people seem so concerned about, which is, like I said, a complete misnomer. So the solution being discussed yesterday, that we need to fix policing. And the second thing that people have asked me questions about that flow directly from that is, okay, cool, we've discussed the solution of what the government needs to do. What if they don't? And that's an extremely valid concern. And I mentioned today on Twitter, I made a post where I say, there are two things that can be true simultaneously. The one is that civil society must maintain and intensify pressure on government and the state to fix the SAPS in the criminal justice system. But at the same time, we must also acknowledge that the state will in all likelihood miserably fail at this, and that we will need to start developing, planning, and building private and parallel solutions to this problem to address it, right? What do I mean by that? Okay, so first things first, private solutions to this issue is maybe we can all get behind this concept of devolving policing down to provincial and local level, right? The SAPS is a centrally managed entity from Pretoria. It is a ludicrous thing to assume that crime in Durban is the same as crime in Cape Town, on the Cape Flats, is the same as rural Eastern Cape or Northern Cape or Free State. These are all different policing challenges that need to be solved at local level by involving that community in its own policing. And the only way you do that, unfortunately, is by federalizing and devolving policing down to that level, where the police are directly accountable to the community which they police with their consent, if we go back to the Pelian principles of policing, which is the foundation of modern policing. And unfortunately, we've drifted quite far away from that, and I don't know if that's ever really applied in South Africa anyway, which kind of explains the state of affairs. Be that as it may, devolving and federalizing policing down to local level is key, right? That is what needs to happen. Sure, there can be some retained national central element like, our version of the FBI for specific issues, but that's not really what this discussion is about. The only people really leading the charge there is the Western Cape Provincial Government and the Democratic Alliance have been pushing hard for the devolution of policing power down at provincial level. I think we need to show that effort our support, but as well as put pressure on them to say it can't stop at provincial level. We can't just have a provincial police because that's the same pitfall. It needs to be devolved further right down. That is key. Whether we call them local county sheriff's department or canton police, doesn't matter. The concept's the same. So that's the one thing we can do. The second thing you can do is become involved in your community safety structures right now, whether it's neighborhood watches or CPFs. CPFs are incredibly powerful organizations, and they are completely underutilized in South Africa. There are so many CPFs that are useless or derelict or captured or otherwise ineffective. And these organizations are governed by an entire chapter of the SAPS Act. They have their own specific CPF regulations. They are empowered by a constitution and, in fact, constitutionally protected by our Republic of South Africa Constitution. So it's a powerful organization with extremely far-reaching oversight powers and responsibilities. If it's correctly and effectively utilized, as several CPFs are doing, whether they're talking here about Honeydew, Milnerton, or Houtbaai, and a good couple of others, there are some guys and girls out there doing incredibly good work with their CPFs in keeping the SAPS in their areas effective, or in their relevant precincts effective. That said, we must also acknowledge that, all those efforts and pressures applied, right? If we see the SAPS as a criminally infiltrated and captured organization with a huge amount of political interference in it, that it's poorly led, and that the Ministry of Police is just a complete disaster, then we have to start looking at real private sector solutions to it. We've already had the way pay for us pertaining private prosecutions. AfriForum and Gerinel and those guys and Barry Bateman doing great work there. So that is something that can be built upon, especially if you look at the power of proper highly qualified, probably former detectives, private investigations, putting good dockets together, pushing for the prosecutions. If the state fails to prosecute those people, you push it into the private side of things. There's a lot you can do under the umbrella of the law pertaining community policing and community safety and security and building projects. I mean, if you look at the Jewish Community Safety Organization, CSOs, or Security Organization, CSO, there's a good couple of other initiatives where you have uniformed volunteers that have all the relevant qualifications and registrations, doing good work in their communities and are supplied with the correct equipment, and that's a community-funded effort. There are a ton of things like this that one can do and that one should do, because we can see that this issue is heading in one direction, and it's that the SAPS is collapsing. And it's either going to be saved by government intervention going in the right direction, or it's not, and it's going to completely collapse and just exist in name only, which, me being a pessimist, thinks is what's going to happen. Part of this issue, and this is a gun discussion, is why is the administration of the Central Firearm Registry still in the hand of the SAPS? There is no reason that function cannot be assigned and tasked to an appropriate private organization to do so with due diligence and transparency, right? It'll certainly, by taking the CFR away from the SAPS, it'll remove all the corrupt and captured elements out of that loop immediately, right? You will no longer have issues about gangster-owned or gang-owned security companies on the Cape Flats and gangsters themselves fraudulently obtaining like firearm licenses when they're certainly not fit and proper people to own them in the first place. You won't have these taxi mafia security organizations that aren't even CERA registered or SAPS accredited getting Section 20 guns to perform route warfare and hits with. That little tap of corrupt patronage and exploitation will be closed immediately. There's a very good case to be made for the Central Firearm Registry to no longer be administered by the SAPS at all. So there are these small things we can start with, you know, to try and slow this collapse of policing in South Africa and possibly even own the space, this safety and security vacuum that has been created by the SAPS collapsing in on itself over the past like 12 years, right? Actually far longer than that. If we don't step up to the plate and start embracing these private and parallel solutions, then I'm afraid to say the situation in South Africa is not going to change or improve at all. We live in a gangster state where criminal syndicates have infiltrated the SAPS and other state security organizations and organs. They are wielding and flexing that power to the max, and we are seeing a without rule of law situation dominating across various areas in South Africa, where we even see area denial by heavily armed criminal groups being sort of performed against state security resources. Right? Zamas are operating with impunity because the cops can't touch them because they just cannot project sufficient force to go after these guys. This is our reality. It means that where the state fails, private people, civil society need to step up and coordinate practical, clever, smart solutions and fund those solutions and do what's necessary. I think we can do it. Let me know in the comments what you think we can do, but we have to start somewhere, and we certainly can't just take this lying down and just wallow in defeat. That's not the way we roll. See you soon, South Africa. All the best and have a happy Valentine's Day.